June 17th, 1944. Normandy, France. The field stretches 300 meters downslope from where Dr. Elisabeth Moreau lies hidden in a collapsed stone barn, her face pressed against ancient timber that smells of rot and old grain. Through gaps in the shattered wall, she watches German soldiers fortify positions in the valley below. 37 men, 4 machine gun nests, 2 mortars. A command post established in what was once a schoolhouse. They have been digging for 3 days, creating interlocking fields of fire that will slaughter any Allied advance through this valley. Elisabeth is 34 years old, a botanist from the University of Lyon, specializing in agricultural cultivation patterns and plant growth cycles. She has spent the last 11 years studying French wildflower populations, documenting seasonal blooming patterns, writing papers nobody reads about pollen distribution and seed germination rates. She is not a soldier. She has never fired a weapon. The only reason she is lying in this ruined barn, watching Germans prepare to kill American troops, is that she knows something about this particular valley that nobody else in France understands. The soil composition here creates unique growing conditions. The drainage patterns and mineral content mean that certain plant species bloom in specific locations at predictable times. And Elisabeth Moreau has spent 4 springs documenting exactly which species bloom where and when. What the Germans fortifying positions below do not know, what Allied command 7 kilometers away cannot possibly guess, is that Elisabeth is about to use her knowledge of Papaver rhoeas, the common red poppy, to call in a precision artillery strike without touching a radio, without sending a message, without making a sound. She is going to turn 300 meters of French farmland into a signal visible from aircraft at 5,000 meters altitude. She is going to do it using seeds, manure, and an understanding of accelerated germination that she published in an obscure academic journal in 1939 that exactly 4 people read. The plan will take 6 days to execute. She has 3 days before American forces reach this valley. If she succeeds, the German position will be destroyed by naval gunfire before a single American soldier enters the killing zone. If she fails, hundreds of men will die advancing through machine gun fire across open ground. Elisabeth shifts position slightly. Her body aches. She has not eaten in 40 hours. The canteen at her side contains perhaps 200 milliliters of water. She has no weapon, no radio, no way to communicate with Allied forces. All she has is a canvas bag containing 2 kilograms of poppy seeds, a trowel, and 30 years of botanical knowledge that she is about to weaponize in a way no military planner has ever conceived. The morning sun climbs higher. German soldiers below continue digging. Elisabeth begins calculating germination rates, soil temperature, moisture content. In 72 hours, she needs a field of red poppies to spell out coordinates visible from the air. The mathematics are brutal. Everything must be perfect. The war has come to Normandy in the form of 150,000 Allied soldiers landing across 5 beaches on June 6, 1944. The initial assault succeeded beyond expectations. American, British, and Canadian forces established beachheads, pushed inland, began the slow, grinding work of liberating France. But 12 days after D-Day, the advance has stalled. German resistance stiffens. Every valley becomes a fortress. Every village requires house-to-house fighting. The bocage, Norman hedgerow country, favors defenders. Tanks cannot maneuver. Infantry advances get channeled into killing zones. The valley Elisabeth watches, designated on Allied maps as Objective Clearwater, sits astride the main route from Omaha Beach to Saint-Lô. Capture Saint-Lô and the Allies break out of the bocage. Fail to capture it, and the invasion bogs down, potentially for months. American commanders know German forces are fortifying positions throughout the region. They need intelligence. Which valleys are defended? Where are the strong points? What routes can be safely traversed? The Office of Strategic Services, American Intelligence, has agents scattered through Normandy. Most are French resistance fighters, locals who know the terrain. They report German positions using hidden radios, coded messages, dead drops. The system works but slowly. Messages take hours or days to reach Allied command. By the time intelligence arrives, German positions have often shifted. What Allied forces desperately need is real-time tactical intelligence. Eyes on target. Immediate communication. Elisabeth Moreau is not OSS. She is not resistance. She is a botanist who happened to be in Normandy on June 6th, studying spring wildflower populations when the invasion began. She was documenting poppy distribution patterns 3 kilometers from Omaha Beach when American soldiers came ashore. She watched the battle from a hillside, saw men die on the sand, watched the tide turn as more troops poured inland. A reasonable person would have fled. Elisabeth stayed, not from bravery or patriotism, but because she understood something important. She had spent 4 years documenting plant growth in this region. She knew which fields would bloom when. She understood soil conditions, drainage patterns, growing degree days, and she realized that knowledge could be useful to the soldiers advancing inland. She reached American lines on June 8th. A patrol from the 1st Infantry Division found her walking down a road carrying her botanical survey equipment. They almost shot her. A woman alone in a combat zone carrying strange instruments looked like a spy. Elisabeth convinced them otherwise by speaking English learned during a research fellowship at Cambridge. She asked to speak with intelligence officers. They sent her to 2nd Lieutenant Robert Hayes, Assistant S, 2 intelligence officer for 1st Battalion, 16th Infantry Regiment. Hayes was 23 years old, overwhelmed, and dealing with 50 urgent priorities simultaneously. He had no time for a French botanist with theories about plants. "Thank you for the information, ma'am. We'll take it under advisement. Please proceed to the civilian collection point," Elisabeth tried to explain. "I can identify German positions by analyzing vegetation patterns. Disturbed soil shows different plant growth. Fresh digging kills certain species. I can tell you where they have been working." Hayes was polite but dismissive. "We have aerial reconnaissance for that." Elisabeth pressed harder. "Aerial reconnaissance shows you what exists now. I can tell you what changed recently. I can differentiate between old fortifications and new construction based on plant die-off patterns." "Thank you, ma'am. We will contact you if needed." She was escorted to a refugee processing area and forgotten. Elisabeth spent 3 days there, sleeping in a tent, eating army rations, watching soldiers prepare for operations. She studied the maps they carried, memorized unit designations, learned the chain of command. On June 11th, she heard officers discussing an upcoming advance through the valley she had been surveying. Objective Clearwater. They expected light resistance. Elisabeth knew better. She had documented that valley extensively. The soil there was recently disturbed across multiple positions. The pattern indicated systematic fortification. She tried again to warn them. She was again ignored. So Elisabeth made a decision that violated every survival instinct. On the night of June 11th, she left the refugee area, walked past American sentries, and headed cross-country back toward the valley. She was going to gather intelligence whether Allied command wanted it or not. She reached the vicinity of Objective Clearwater on June 13th. German forces were everywhere. She hid in the ruined barn and watched them work. They were not creating light defensive positions. They were building a fortress. Elisabeth counted emplacements, estimated troop strength, mapped fields of fire. She had no way to communicate what she saw. No radio. No way to reach Allied lines without crossing German positions. Even if she could get back, would anyone believe her? A botanist claiming to have intelligence on German defenses? She needed proof. She needed something undeniable. That night, lying in the barn, she had an idea so audacious it seemed insane. What if she could create a visible signal, not a fire or flare that would alert Germans? Something subtle that would be invisible on the ground but obvious from the air. Something that looked natural but conveyed precise information. She thought about her work. Decades of studying how plants colonize disturbed soil. How quickly certain species germinate under optimal conditions. How flowering plants create visible color patterns. Poppies. Red poppies bloom across Normandy every spring, splashes of crimson in green fields. Farmers hate them because they spread aggressively, colonizing any disturbed soil. The seeds remain viable in the ground for decades. Add water, warmth, and sunlight, and they germinate in 72 hours. Under perfect conditions, they bloom in 12 days. Elisabeth had 2 kilograms of poppy seeds in her field kit. She had collected them 3 weeks earlier for a germination study. She had concentrated fertilizer, ammonium nitrate pellets, used to accelerate growth in experimental plots. She had her knowledge of this specific valley, which areas had optimal soil moisture, which slopes received maximum sunlight. If she could plant poppies in a specific pattern, if she could make them bloom fast enough, she could create a signal visible from reconnaissance aircraft. Not just a marker. Actual information. Coordinates. She could spell out numbers using lines of red flowers. The Germans would never notice. They were not looking at the fields around their positions. They were focused on approaches, on threats, on the tree lines where enemies might appear. They would not see a few red flowers blooming in a nearby meadow. But an American pilot flying reconnaissance at 5,000 meters would see a clear pattern. Numbers spelled out in crimson. Grid coordinates pointing directly to the German strongpoint. The technique was theoretically possible. Elisabeth had published research on accelerated poppy germination. Under optimal conditions, with adequate moisture, warm soil, and concentrated nitrogen fertilizer, Papaver rhoeas could complete its growth cycle in 14 days from seed to flower. She needed it to happen in 6 days. That required perfect execution. She would need to prepare the soil, plant seeds in precise patterns, ensure adequate moisture, protect the seeds from birds, and hope weather cooperated. Failure at any step meant the signal would not develop in time. Success meant she could guide American artillery onto the German position with precision no radio operator could match. She would be turning a field into a targeting grid. Elisabeth Moreau was born March 3, 1910, in Lyon, France. Her father taught literature at the university. Her mother was a painter specializing in botanical illustrations. Elisabeth grew up surrounded by books and art, particularly detailed drawings of plant structures. She showed early fascination with how things grew. At age 7, she maintained a garden journal, documenting which seeds sprouted when, how fast seedlings developed, which plants thrived in shade versus sunlight. Her parents encouraged the obsession. By age 12, she was conducting crude experiments, testing whether different soil mixtures affected growth rates. At 15, she published her first paper in an amateur naturalist journal, documenting wildflower distribution in the hills outside Lyon. She attended the University of Lyon, studying botany under Professor Henri Beaumont, a legendary figure in French agricultural science. Beaumont taught her rigorous methodology, document everything, control variables, repeat experiments, test assumptions. Under his guidance, Elisabeth specialized in germination ecology, the study of how seeds transition from dormancy to active growth. Her doctoral thesis, completed in 1934, examined how soil temperature and moisture interact to trigger germination in annual wildflowers. It was dry technical work, unreadable to non-specialists, but it established her as an expert in a very narrow field. From 1934 to 1939, Elisabeth taught botany at Lyon and conducted field research during summers. She traveled throughout France, documenting regional plant populations, collecting seeds, analyzing soil samples. Her work was meticulous and boring. She published in obscure journals. She attended conferences where a dozen specialists presented papers to each other. She was building a comprehensive database of French wildflower populations, documenting where species occurred, when they bloomed, how they spread. Nobody cared, except other botanists. When war began in 1939, Elisabeth continued her work. The government classified her as non-essential. She was too old for military service, too specialized for war work. She kept teaching, kept researching, tried to ignore the war consuming Europe. When Germany invaded France in May 1940, Elisabeth was in the field near Rouen, documenting early spring blooms. She returned to Lyon to find the city under occupation. The university continued operating under German oversight. She kept her position by being politically invisible, teaching required courses, avoiding attention. But Elisabeth quietly resisted. She hid Jewish colleagues in her apartment. She provided false identification papers using university resources. She helped students escape forced labor conscription. Small acts. Nothing heroic, just a professor using her position to undermine occupation in tiny ways. By 1944, she was exhausted. 4 years of occupation, of watching colleagues arrested, of living under constant surveillance. When spring came, she requested permission to conduct field research in Normandy. The Germans approved. A middle-aged botanist studying flowers posed no security threat. Elisabeth left Lyon in May, carrying her field equipment, officially studying wildflower populations. Unofficially, she was gathering intelligence for a resistance network, documenting German fortifications disguised as agricultural surveys. She noted which fields were disturbed, which forests had new roads, which farms were occupied by troops. She encoded the information in botanical terminology. Poppy concentrations meant machine gun positions. Unusual daisy distributions indicated vehicle parks. She sent reports through resistance networks to Allied intelligence. She had no confirmation anyone received them. On June 6th, when the invasion began, Elisabeth was 3 kilometers from Omaha Beach. She watched history unfold. When American troops advanced inland, she saw an opportunity. Her knowledge of Norman vegetation could help them. She tried to share it. They ignored her. So now, June 17th, she is implementing a plan that will either revolutionize battlefield intelligence or get her killed. She is going to plant a message the Germans cannot see but the Allies cannot miss. The technical challenge is enormous. Elisabeth needs to create a visible pattern 300 meters long, using flowers that will bloom in 6 days. Normal poppy germination takes 10 to 14 days under ideal conditions. She needs to compress that cycle by stimulating maximum growth from the moment seeds enter the ground. First requirement: soil preparation. Poppies germinate best in loose, well-aerated soil with good moisture retention. The field she has selected, a gentle slope 200 meters west of German positions, was farmland before the war. The soil is clay loam, decent fertility, currently covered in grass and weeds. She needs to expose bare soil in specific patterns without the Germans noticing someone is working the field. She cannot dig during daylight. German sentries watch the surrounding area. Any visible activity would draw fire. She must work at night, in complete darkness, using only touch to guide her. The pattern she needs to create is simple but must be precise. Numbers spelling out grid coordinates, 2 sets of 6 digits each, indicating the exact location of the German command post. Each digit will be 3 meters tall, 1 meter wide, formed by lines of poppies. Total pattern length, 70 meters. Width, 15 meters. visible from aircraft at altitude but meaningless to ground observers who see only scattered red flowers. Elisabeth begins work on the night of June 17th. She waits until after midnight when German sentries are least alert. She crawls from the barn to the field carrying her trowel, seeds, and fertilizer. The distance is 80 meters across open ground. It takes her 40 minutes, moving centimeters at a time, freezing whenever flares illuminate the valley. She reaches the field perimeter at 0140 hours. The grass is thick, damp with dew. She begins preparing the first digit, the number 4. Using the trowel, she scrapes away grass in a straight line 3 meters long, 1 hand width wide. She works by touch, measuring distances with her forearm. The soil beneath the grass is soft, recently moistened by rain, perfect for germination. She loosens the soil to a depth of approximately 5 centimeters, creating a seedbed. She sprinkles poppy seeds along the prepared line, approximately 200 seeds per meter. She covers them lightly with soil, then applies tiny amounts of concentrated ammonium nitrate fertilizer. The fertilizer is critical. Poppies respond dramatically to nitrogen. High concentrations stimulate rapid growth, accelerating the entire life cycle. Too much nitrogen burns the seedlings. Too little, and they grow normally. Blooming too late. Elisabeth is applying approximately 3 grams per meter, a concentration she determined through experiments years ago. She never imagined using that knowledge to create battlefield signals. The first digit takes 90 minutes to prepare. She starts the second digit, the number 7. Her hands are cramping. Her back aches from crawling. She forces herself to continue. By 0430 hours, she has completed 3 digits. She hears movement from German positions. Sentries changing shifts. She freezes, pressed flat in the grass. Voices carry across the night. German soldiers talking, complaining about the cold, about boredom. They are 60 meters away, unaware that an enemy is working meters from their perimeter. The voices fade. Elisabeth continues. She completes the 4th digit by 0515. Dawn is approaching. She must retreat before light exposes her. She carefully smooths the disturbed areas, scatters loose grass over the prepared seed lines, makes everything look natural. From ground level, the work is invisible. Just bare soil amid grass, the kind of random patches that occur naturally in any field. She crawls back to the barn, arriving as the sky brightens in the east. Her clothes are soaked with dew. Her hands are bleeding from scraping against stones. She allows herself 200 milliliters of water and collapses in exhaustion. She has completed 4 of 12 digits. She needs 2 more nights. The next 48 hours will determine if the technique works. Seeds need moisture, warmth, and time to germinate. Elisabeth cannot control weather. If the next 2 days are cold or excessively dry, germination will slow. If heavy rain washes away the seeds, the pattern will fail. She can only wait and hope the conditions align. June 18th dawns clear and warm. By mid-morning, temperature reaches 23 degrees Celsius. Ideal for germination. The soil retains moisture from recent rain. Conditions are perfect. Elisabeth watches the field through gaps in the barn wall. Nothing is visible yet. The seeds are underground, absorbing water, beginning the complex biochemical cascade that transforms dormant embryos into living plants. By late afternoon, the first seeds crack open. Root radicals emerge, pushing into soil. Within hours, the radicals elongate, anchoring the seeds. By evening, tiny shoots begin pushing toward the surface. The Germans remain oblivious. Sentries patrol. Soldiers dig fighting positions. Nobody looks at the field where thousands of poppy seeds are germinating in precise geometric patterns. That night, Elisabeth returns to the field. She completes digits 5 through 8. Her technique improves with practice. She works faster, more efficiently. By 0500 hours, she has 8 of 12 digits planted. She needs one more night. June 19th is warmer, 25 degrees Celsius. The first seedlings emerge from the soil, tiny green shoots barely visible among the grass. Elisabeth watches through the day, tracking progress. The fertilizer is working. The seedlings are growing faster than normal. By late afternoon, the first leaves unfurl. By evening, the seedlings are approximately 2 centimeters tall, still invisible to casual observation but developing rapidly. The Germans continue fortifying. They bring in additional ammunition. More troops arrive, reinforcing the position. Elisabeth counts 49 men now. The position is becoming a major strongpoint. If American forces attack without knowing its strength, casualties will be devastating. That night, she completes the final 4 digits. 12 digits total, spelling out grid coordinates 4, 7, 2, 3, 6, 8, and 2, 9, 4, 1, 5, 7, the exact location of the German command post. She applies extra fertilizer to the completed sections, stimulating maximum growth. By 0600 hours, she is finished. Now she must wait for the poppies to bloom, June 20th. The seedlings are 4 centimeters tall, growing visibly faster than surrounding vegetation. The fertilizer creates unnatural growth rates. By afternoon, they reach 7 centimeters. First, true leaves develop. The plants begin budding, forming the structures that will become flowers. June 21st. The seedlings are 12 centimeters tall. Buds swell. Elisabeth can see the faint pattern now. Lines of slightly taller, slightly darker green vegetation amid the grass. From ground level, it looks like natural variation. From the air, it would show as faint lines. Not enough contrast yet, but developing. June 22nd. The first flowers open. Tiny red blooms scattered along the planted lines. The pattern becomes visible. Elisabeth watches German soldiers walk within 20 meters of the field. None of them notice. Why would they? It is just flowers blooming in a meadow. Poppies bloom across Normandy every spring. These are unremarkable. But from altitude, an observer would see something different. Lines of red amid green. A pattern too geometric to be natural. Numbers. By afternoon, 30% of the planted poppies are blooming. The pattern is clear but still faint. Elisabeth needs more flowers. She cannot accelerate growth further. She can only wait for the remaining buds to open. She calculates. American forces are scheduled to advance into this valley on June 24th, 2 days. She needs reconnaissance aircraft to spot the pattern before then, to report coordinates, to call in fire support. Otherwise, American troops will walk into the German strongpoint blind. That afternoon, she hears aircraft, high-altitude engine noise. She cannot see them through the cloud cover. Are they Allied reconnaissance? German fighters? She has no way to know. She can only hope American photo reconnaissance is flying today. Hope someone is looking at this valley. Hope they see the pattern. The aircraft pass. Silence returns. Elisabeth watches the poppies continue blooming. June 23rd. 70% of the planted poppies are flowering. The pattern is unmistakable now. 12 numbers spelled out in crimson against green. Each digit 3 meters tall, clearly visible. Elisabeth estimates visibility range at 3,000 meters altitude, under clear conditions. Will reconnaissance aircraft fly low enough? Will they be looking at this specific valley? She has done everything possible. The rest is chance. At 1300 hours, she hears aircraft again. Closer this time. The engine note changes, descending. She sees them. 2 American P-38 Lightning fighters flying low reconnaissance, cameras mounted under their fuselages. They make one pass over the valley at approximately 1,500 meters altitude. They fly directly over her poppy field. She watches them pass, willing the pilots to look down, to see the pattern. The aircraft circle once, then depart west. Did they see it? Did the cameras capture the image? Elisabeth has no way to know. She can only wait. By late afternoon, German soldiers begin reacting to something. Officers shout orders. Men scramble to fighting positions. Sentries scan the sky nervously. Something has changed. Then Elisabeth hears it. A sound like distant thunder, growing louder. Incoming artillery. Naval gunfire from Allied warships offshore. She presses herself flat in the barn corner. The first salvo arrives at 17:15 hours. Shells scream overhead, massive naval projectiles arcing down from kilometers away. They impact directly on the German command post. The schoolhouse explodes. The second salvo lands 15 seconds later, walking across the German positions. Machine gun nests disintegrate. Mortar positions vanish in eruptions of earth and fire. The barrage continues for 7 minutes, 35 rounds, 14-inch naval shells from USS Nevada offshore. The German position ceases to exist. When the bombardment ends, 43 German soldiers are dead. The survivors, 6 men, retreat northeast in complete disorder. The valley is clear. Elisabeth remains in the barn, ears ringing from concussion. Her poppy field is undamaged. The flowers continue blooming, bright red numbers spelling out coordinates that just guided 35 naval shells onto target with surgical precision. June 24th. American troops advance through the valley. 1st Battalion, 16th Infantry Regiment, moving cautiously, expecting heavy resistance. They find destroyed fortifications and bodies. No opposition. They secure the valley in 2 hours without firing a shot. Lieutenant Hayes, the intelligence officer who dismissed Elisabeth 2 weeks earlier, walks through the ruins trying to understand what happened. His map shows this position was supposed to be lightly defended. Intelligence indicated no major German presence, yet someone called in a devastating bombardment on a strongpoint nobody knew existed. One of his scouts reports something odd. "Sir, there are flowers in that field forming numbers." Hayes looks. He sees the poppy pattern. 12 digits in red flowers. He checks his map. The numbers are grid coordinates. The coordinates of the destroyed German command post. Accurate to within 10 meters. He stares for a long moment, then asks if anyone knows how flowers form numbers. A sergeant suggests perhaps the French resistance planted them as a signal. Hayes considers this. He remembers the botanist, the woman who claimed she could identify German positions through plant analysis. He radioed to division headquarters. "Did anyone report coordinates for this location?" Affirmative. Photo reconnaissance spotted a ground signal on June 23rd. Numbers spelled out in vegetation. Coordinates were verified and passed to naval gunfire support. Target was engaged with priority fire. Hayes asks who placed the signal. Headquarters does not know. Assumed to be OSS or resistance. Hayes walks to the poppy field. He studies the pattern. The planting is precise, the spacing exact. The flowers are blooming faster than natural growth patterns would explain. This was not chance. Someone engineered this. Someone with extensive botanical knowledge and extraordinary patience. He remembers Elisabeth explaining her research. "I can differentiate between old fortifications and new construction based on plant die-off patterns." He looks around the valley. If she survived, where would she hide? He organizes a search. Soldiers check abandoned buildings. They find Elisabeth in the barn at 18:30 hours. She is unconscious, severely dehydrated, suffering from exposure. A medic provides immediate treatment. They evacuate her to a field hospital. She regains consciousness 3 hours later. Hayes is waiting. He asks one question. "Did you plant those poppies?" Elisabeth nods weakly. Why did you not simply return to our lines and report German positions? Because you would not have believed me. You needed proof. So, I grew you proof. Hayes stares at her. You stayed behind enemy lines for 6 days to plant flowers spelling out coordinates. That is insane. Elisabeth manages a faint smile. It was simply accelerated germination under optimal conditions. Perfectly reasonable botany. Hayes laughs despite himself. Your perfectly reasonable botany just saved 200 American lives. We were going to assault that position tomorrow. We would have walked into a slaughterhouse. Elisabeth is evacuated to England for recovery. The army wants to debrief her extensively. Can the technique be replicated? Can other botanists create similar signals? Elisabeth explains the limitations. It requires specific plant species with predictable growth patterns. It requires knowledge of local soil conditions. It requires time, at least 5 to 7 days. It requires weather cooperation, and it requires extraordinary luck. I happen to be in the correct location with the correct materials at the correct time. That convergence is unlikely to repeat. Still, Allied intelligence adds the technique to their tactical manual. Signal creation through accelerated plant growth. Applicable in circumstances where radio communication is impossible and visual signals would compromise position, recommended only for specialists with advanced botanical training. The technique is never successfully replicated during the war. The conditions that made it possible, Elisabeth's specific knowledge, the right location, cooperative weather, were unique. But Elisabeth's poppy field becomes legendary among intelligence officers. The botanist who called in a naval bombardment by growing flowers. The story spreads through Allied command. When General Eisenhower hears it, he insists on meeting her. She is flown to Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force on July 3rd. Eisenhower shakes her hand. Dr. Moreau, I have commanded millions of soldiers and seen every type of courage. Your particular brand of courage, waiting alone behind enemy lines, gambling that flowers would bloom in time, is among the most remarkable I have encountered. Elisabeth deflects the praise. I simply applied established botanical principles to an unusual problem. Any competent plant scientist could have done the same. Eisenhower smiles. Perhaps, but only you did it. Elisabeth returns to France in August after Paris is liberated. She resumes her position at the University of Lyon. She publishes no papers about her wartime activities. Her colleagues never learn what happened in Normandy. She continues teaching botany until retirement in 1969. She dies peacefully in Lyon on November 12, 1983, at age 73. Her obituary mentions a distinguished career in botanical research. It makes no reference to military service or intelligence work. The classified reports remain sealed until 1994, when the U.S. government declassifies wartime OSS documents. Researchers discover the account of Lieutenant Hayes describing the poppy field signal. Further investigation reveals Elisabeth's identity. By then, she has been dead 11 years. In 2008, the French government posthumously awards Elisabeth the Legion of Honor for her contribution to Allied victory. A plaque is installed in the Normandy Valley, now returned to farmland, commemorating the site where botanical knowledge became a weapon. The plaque reads, "Here on June 17 through 23, 1944, Dr. Elisabeth Moreau created a signal using cultivated poppies to mark enemy positions. Her innovative technique enabled precision fire that saved numerous Allied lives. The field where she worked remains farmland. Poppies still bloom there every spring, bright red flowers scattered across green slopes. None form patterns. They are simply flowers now, growing wild, unaware they once spelled out death for 43 men and salvation for 200 others." The science Elisabeth applied was not new. Accelerated germination through controlled conditions was well understood by 1944. What was extraordinary was recognizing that scientific knowledge could be weaponized, that patient observation could become tactical intelligence, that a botanist armed with seeds could achieve what soldiers with rifles could not. Modern military intelligence services study the case as an example of innovative thinking under constraint. When conventional communication fails, can environmental features be manipulated to convey information? The answer is yes, if you understand the environment sufficiently. Elisabeth's legacy is not the specific technique, it is the principle. Expertise in unexpected domains can create asymmetric advantages. A botanist who understands plant growth can create signals invisible to enemies. An engineer who understands structural loads can sabotage without explosives. A railway porter who understands brake systems can derail tanks. Wars are won by soldiers, but victories are enabled by specialists who see possibilities others miss. Elisabeth Moreau saw flowers where others saw only terrain. She saw growth rates where others saw only decoration. She saw coordinates where others saw only color. And because she saw what others could not, men lived who would have died. The poppies in that Norman valley will bloom again next spring. As they do every spring, red flowers scattered randomly across green fields. They convey no message now. But for 7 days in June 1944, they were the clearest communication any soldier could have asked for. They said, "Here, strike here." And the shells came, precisely on target, guided by nothing more than flowers and knowledge and the extraordinary patience of one botanist who understood that sometimes the best signals are the ones that grow.